Good day. Many of you know me. I am Father Andrew Caroblus, pastor of St. Peter and Paul Church in Wisconsin Rapids. I would like you to join me now on a journey back in time to the 1830s. From there, we will move forward through the historical record of the past right up to the present. Paul, would you be so kind as to take over now?
Thank you, Father. Paul Gross here. Welcome to the fascinating history of St. Peter and Paul Parish. As near as is known, the first offering of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass in what is now known as Wisconsin Rapids was by a Father Vandenbroek back in 1837. Father Vandenbroek made annual visits to the area, which meant that most folks could only get to Mass once a year. It wasn't until 1854 that the first church was built on the northwest corner of the intersection of 3rd Avenue North and Jackson Streets on the west side of the river, then known as Centralia.
Of course, there are no pictures of the building, but the little church has frequently been depicted as a log structure. However, in the writings of Father William Redding, the structure is specifically described as a small frame building measuring 20 by 30 feet and most likely would have appeared as in this random sketch. At the time, the itinerant pastor was a Father Louis Dale. Prior to 1854, services were held in the homes of Catholic people. In December of 1856, the little church was destroyed by fire. It has been said that a candle ignited some of the greenery that had been used to decorate the church for the Christmas Mass.
Meanwhile, the Catholic population on the east side of the river, then known as Grand Rapids, had expanded remarkably. The site on 2nd Street North was selected, and the land was donated by Mr. Francis Buren, where a new church and residence were erected. It was at this same time in 1857 when the first resident priest, Father James Steele, was assigned to the parish.
By 1859, the second church and residence were completed, and Father Steele was replaced by Reverend A.J. David. The parish continued to grow, and just 9 years later, in 1886, the foundation was laid for a new and larger church which preceded the present church. Due to financial difficulties, progress was slow. The new church was finally completed and dedicated on June 29th of 1873. It was 3 years later, in 1876, that the church was struck by lightning, causing considerable damage. During the period of time covered by the first resident priest right up to the dedication of the new building in 1873, there were 6 different pastors at St. Peter and Paul, and there were 2 periods when there was no priest at all, and a priest would come all the way from Stevens Point to serve the parish needs. During one of these periods, the parish was without a pastor for a period of 15 months. Finally, in December of 1871, Father Francis Tangway was sent by the Bishop of Green Bay to take charge of the parish, and it was through his efforts that the dedication finally took place on June 29th of 1873. In 1878, Father Charles Barrell, a convert to the Catholic faith, was appointed pastor of St. Peter and Paul and presided for 19 years, when on July of 1897, Father Barrell passed away. His body was laid in state within the church as shown in this photo, which was taken on July 21st of 1897. The church was draped in black. Flowers and plants were everywhere to be seen. Highly regarded by the entire community, Father Barrell was mourned by many regardless of their faith. He was the first priest to be buried in Calvary Cemetery. The much-loved Father Barrell also served the parishes of Pittsville, Elkdorf, and Rudolph. Father Barrell was succeeded by Father William Van Roosmalen, who served the parish until 1904. It was at this same time that the parish was divided for the formation of the new St. Lawrence Parish on the west side of the river. It was also during his tenure that Father Van Roosmalen made extensive repairs to the church properties, and a new rectory was built. The Reverend B. Hugenoth succeeded Father Roosmalen in 1904, and in the spring of 1905, Grand Rapids became a part of the La Crosse Diocese. Reverend Hugenoth saw a need for improvements in the church interior, and in 1906, the church was extensively remodeled. The improvements included new windows, 3 new altars, and a vast amount of decorating.
Once again, we go back in time to the year
1886.
when the parish residence was remodeled as a convent and parochial school. A separate residence was purchased for the pastorate. The new school was placed in charge of the Sisters of Notre Dame from Milwaukee. The first 3 nuns and a candidate arrived on September 14th. School started just 2 days later with 60 students in 2 classrooms, and there were no benches. The school's attendance increased rapidly and necessitated the building of a new 4-room school in 1895.
This photo was taken around 1907. Information on the blackboards tells us that this is a combined class of 3rd and 4th grade pupils. This photo of another class was taken about the same time. In 1913, the school was enlarged, and as the attendance continued to grow, a new 4-room brick addition was erected in 1924, when the congregation numbered over 400 families. At the time, the parish complex appeared as in this photo. On December 24th of that same year, fire broke out in the old portion of the school. Janitor Henry Hess turned in the alarm at 5:45 a.m. The temperature was 12 below zero, and fighting the fire was difficult. The fire was blamed on defective wiring. The old section was completely destroyed, but the new brick section was left untouched. The following year, 7 rooms and a gymnasium were built, and the new school appeared much as it does today. In 1930, a fine new brick convent was built on the same site as the old convent. To accomplish this, the old convent was split into 2 parts, which were then moved across 3rd Street, where they still stand as 2 separate residences. The new convent included a small private chapel on the 1st floor and a larger basement chapel, which was used for the 8 a.m. Mass on school days during the cold winter months, when the large church was difficult to heat. For a time, as many as 14 sisters resided in the convent, including 1 cook and a music teacher. It was a great day in September of 1986 when the oldest Catholic school in Wisconsin Rapids celebrated its 100th anniversary. It was on July 1st of 1907 that Father William Redding was appointed pastor of St. Peter and Paul. Up until that time, no less than 21 priests had served the needs of Catholics in Wisconsin Rapids, and the parish now had over 2,000 members. Father Redding was born in La Roche, Luxembourg in 1867. That same year, his parents moved to the United States and settled in Minnesota. Young William was one of 10 children in the Redding family. He was ordained on June 4th of 1893. Father Redding was endeared by parishioners and community alike. He was a charter member of the Wisconsin Rapids Rotary Club, and here we see him riding on a float with his altar boys in the 1930 4th of July parade. In 1929, Father F.J. Kundinger was assigned to the parish as assistant pastor. His tenure deserves special mention for his total parish involvement and special assistance to the aging Father Redding. On December 8th of 1931, Father Redding was made domestic prelate to His Holiness Pope Pius XI and was invested to this office as Monsignor on February 8th of 1932. This is an actual motion picture of the procession as it moved from the rectory to the church on that cold February day. Bishop McGavick is shown just behind the two priests following Father Redding. In the church, special decorations and spruce festoons were installed for the occasion. Here, Monsignor Redding is standing in the center of the altar area, following the investiture in the robes of Monsignor by Bishop McGavick. On June 27, 1943, a pontifical high mass was held in the Lincoln Field House celebrating Monsignor Redding's Golden Jubilee, 50 years a priest. Monsignor Redding died on June 23, 1945, and is buried in Calvary Cemetery. Following the death of Monsignor Redding, Father Charles Guiley was appointed pastor of St. Peter and Paul in January of 1946. His assistants at the time were Father C.J. Dockendorf and Father Eugene Smith. 1 year later, in 1947, another appointment was forthcoming for Father Guiley when he was named consular of the Diocese of La Crosse. It was in that same year that the West Side Catholics belonging to St. Peter and Paul withdrew and formed a new West Side parish, Our Lady Queen of Heaven, usually referred to as St. Mary's. About the same time, it had become increasingly clear that the old church building that had served the parish since 1873 was becoming very costly to maintain, and the need for a new church building was very evident. Father Guiley, with the parishioners, began planning a new church and hired A.F. Billmeyer as architect. Meanwhile, in 1948, Father Guiley was appointed Vicar General of the La Crosse Diocese and served in that capacity until 1973. It was just a year later, in May of 1949, that Father Guiley was appointed domestic prelate by Bishop Tracy and was invested in the robes of Monsignor on September 27th. Construction of the new church began in April of 1950, and on September 24, 1951, Bishop Tracy presided over the cornerstone dedication. 2 months later, on November 25, 1951, at 10:30 a.m., following the final Mass in the old church, the Mass of dedication at the new church took place, and for the first time, parishioners heard the majestic sound of the beautiful new Wicks pipe organ. By early spring of 1952, demolition of the old church began, the area to be used as a parking lot. For almost 100 years, the slender spear and large cross had dominated the skyline, as is evident in this photo taken around the turn of the century, before there was even a Consolidated Papers. This was the scene on May 11, 1952, as the 125-foot steeple plunged to earth. The Milwaukee Sentinel covered the event on May 12th with this photo by Don Crone. In 1956, another parish was formed from St. Peter and Paul congregation. The parish of St. Vincent de Paul was organized to serve the rapidly expanding population on the southeast portion of the city. And Father C.J. Dockendorf was appointed pastor. Twice again, Monsignor Guiley was to be recognized for his religious zeal. In 1962, Pope John XXIII promoted him to the rank of Protonotary Apostolic, and in 1964, Monsignor Guiley was elected diocesan administrator, a post he held until Bishop Frecking was installed. One of Father Guiley's last accomplishments at St. Peter and Paul was the interior decorating of the church. Prior to this time, the walls were plain with a total absence of artwork. In February of 1968, Monsignor Guiley resigned as pastor. He remained active in the La Crosse Diocese until his retirement in June of 1969 on the 50th anniversary of his ordination. Monsignor Guiley died on April 18, 1975 at St. Anne Hospice in Wyoming and is buried in the family lot at Schulzburg, Wisconsin. In April of 1968, following the resignation of Monsignor Guiley as pastor, Father Andrew Grobless and Father George Pasale were designated co-pastors of St. Peter and Paul. 2 years later, in June of 1970, Father Pasale was appointed pastor of St. John's Parish in Marshfield. Father Grobless then assumed full pastoral duties
of Saints Peter and Paul.
For a short time, he had an assistant priest, first Father Robert Strevler, followed by Father Leon Powell. Almost immediately, Father Carobulus embarked on an extensive program to upgrade the parish facilities. He started first with the school by installing new lower ceilings and modern, efficient windows, which greatly reduced the heating bills. Other steps were taken to completely modernize the school, making it a first-class facility. Soon there was a new blacktop parking lot and playground, all of which was the result of his tireless efforts. Also through his efforts, a large weatherproof entrance was added to the rear of the school. In 1978, Father Carobulus petitioned the city to close off a part of 2nd Street North and made the space into a park-like area, handsomely trimmed with trees and shrubs. The aging rectory, which had remained virtually untouched since it was constructed in 1904, became his next target for improvement. There were those who would have demolished the home in favor of a new residence, but Father Carobulus saw great potential in the existing structure and embarked on an extensive remodeling project. The beautiful end result included the addition of a bedroom and living room upstairs and an office and living room downstairs. The garage was also enlarged to make room for the grounds equipment. By 1986, the church was in need of numerous repairs to the pews, windows, painting, and stonework. Once again, Father Carobulus met the challenge, ever conscious of getting the best possible job with the least amount of impact on the parish budget. But what about the other side of this man, pastor of our Saints Peter and Paul parish? Father Carobulus was ordained on May 22nd of 1954 by Bishop John P. Tracy. Upon meeting him for the first time, one quickly realizes that Father Andrew Carobulus is a no-nonsense kind of person, with a great sense of humor and the ability to laugh at himself, and is most proud of his Lithuanian descent. He also has the courage to say exactly what he feels on any issue, regardless of personal consequences. This is especially true in religious matters, where he has absolutely no patience with church liberals who would tamper with the laws of God and church. His religious zeal is unquestionable, and he has certainly earned the respect of all who know him well. On numerous occasions, he has traveled to Rome and the Holy Land, not so much as a tourist, but as his love for God and church. On 2 separate occasions, he's been granted an audience with Pope John Paul II in Rome. This picture was taken in October of 1980. The Pope and Father Carobulus had celebrated Mass together in Stevens Point in 1967, when the Pope, still a cardinal, visited the area. This was the scene on October 15th, 1979, when Bishop Frecking was on hand to bless the statue of the Blessed Virgin in the schoolyard. It was on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the ordination of Father Carobulus, who had donated the statue at Rock to the parish. The churchyard was further enhanced when more statuary was added in 1989. The figures of St. Peter and Paul were blessed at a special ceremony on June 26th. One month later, under the direction of Father Carobulus, Calvary Cemetery was enhanced with a beautiful sculptured scene of the crucifixion at a special outdoor mass. This again was all a part of the efforts of Father Carobulus to beautify the cemetery and to make it more functional. Previously, he was the motivating force that brought about a much-needed caretaker's office and storage facility at the cemetery. In the past, Saints Peter and Paul has been home to many assistant priests, Today, with dwindling numbers entering the religious life, assistants are no longer as available as they once were, just as the School Sisters of Notre Dame have long been gone because of their reduced numbers. Over the years, 11 priests and 19 nuns have entered the religious life from St. Peter and Paul. Father Grobles constantly urges parishioners to pray for vocations, which brings us up to the present. April 5th of 1997 was a proud day for Saints Peter and Paul when our own Brian Daniel Conopo was ordained deaconette with the Most Reverend Raymond L. Burke, Bishop of La Crosse, as the principal celebrant. It has been almost 40 years since a priest from Saints Peter and Paul had been ordained, and certainly this was an especially proud day for Father Grobles, who had been such an inspiration to Deacon Conopo. Brian will be ordained to the priesthood in 1998. Bishop Burke pauses to offer his special greetings and appreciation to Brian's family.